Welcome back to a new tier maker, this time for the second set of Lorcana, Rise of the Floodborn. There's 204 new cards for Lorcana's second set, Rise of the Floodborn, with some very, very cool cards that I'm excited to get into. We're coming back with our tier maker here. This is for a more competitive view of the cards. So we've got our 5 tiers here: common in top decks, rare in top decks, good in archetype, casual cards, and starter deck cards. These are going from obviously most competitive to least competitive. Common in top decks, pretty self-explanatory. These are cards that I expect to be popping up in topping decks across tournaments throughout Rise of the Floodborn's lifespan. Rare in top decks means that you might see these as 1 or 2 copies, or maybe as a sub archetype in a deck that is not super popular, though still decently powerful. Good in archetype means that I think that in the right deck these cards are good, but those right decks might not be too powerful. Overall, casual cards are just kind of like good enough, especially if you're on a budget. These cards are definitely going to be mostly what you're looking at. And then starter deck cards are cards that realistically you shouldn't really be looking at if you're looking to have a more competitive edge in Lorcana. Lots of these cards are going to be assumedly starting in the starter decks, though at this time of recording I have not seen what's actually in the starter decks, so it might be fun to check back and see how many of these cards actually appear in the starter deck. With that out of the way, we've got 204 cards to get through, so we are going to try and get through these a little quick, because even if I spend 30 seconds on every card, we will be here for over an hour. So without further ado, we are going to jump on into it. So we've got Bashful here. Bashful is one of the 7 dwarves. Jesus. I think that they are a casual archetype. I think that basically all the 7 dwarves fit here. Christopher Robin says, whenever you ready this character, if you have 2 or more other characters in play, you gain 2 lore, and he also quests for 2. He is 6 lore, however, which is not great. He's not a princess, so he doesn't get the untapped stuff from Moana to really churn him out. There's no way to make him a princess as of right now. I think he's potentially good in like the yellow slam bunch dudes archetypes, but I'm not super impressed by him, admittedly. Cinderella, this thing is insane. I've done a minor amount of testing with the new set so far, just for the new decks that we'll be bringing you guys in the next few weeks. This card is crazy. Even if it wasn't named Cinderella, this card would still be like really good. Because it's named Cinderella, it's psychotic. This card is incredible. Keep an eye out for Cinderella, as I'm calling her. Cobra Bubbles is generic. As with, I think, basically every card that has no effect text, it's going to go in starter deck. This card is not great. Its stats are not great. It needed to quest for like 4 in order to be worth it. It's not amazing. Next up, we've got Doc here. Doc is another one of our dwarves. When he quests, you pay 1 less for the next character you play this turn. Not the end of the world, but not great. Dopey is whenever this character is banished, all your other 7 dwarves get +2 attack until your next turn, which is cute, but again, not great. Eudora here is no text, so she's going to go on the bottom. 5 mana for a 1/9 is interesting, though I think that any purpose that she would serve, other cards serve better, and they have effect text. This Gaston, I think, has chance to show up in the songs deck that Yellow is, or that Amber, sorry, is common at playing. It is a 3-mana Singer 5. We do have Ariel already from the first set, who is a 3-mana Singer 5 and adds songs to your hand. His stats are slightly better than hers at a 3/3, as opposed to, I believe, Ariel is a 2/3. If you really needed like a 5th and 6th copy of Ariel for that Singer 5 slot line, maybe you could think about Gaston, but I think that there are a lot of other cards that do his job a little bit better. Grand Duke, I think, is bad. Even in the Princesses deck, you wouldn't play him. He buffs all your princesses, kings, and queens by 1 attack. I don't think he's very good. Grumpy says all your other 7 dwarves characters get +1 attack. Same thing, attack buffing, not super useful. Happy has support. He's a 3 attack supporter for 5 that quests for 2. There's possible he goes in the support archetype that's kind of being pushed in this deck in, I believe it's in green and blue, but like, you know, he's in yellow, so that's not those colors. King Louis, whenever another character is banished, you may heal 2 from this character. He's 7 ink. Yeah, he's 7 ink. He quests for 2. He's a 3/8. Not the end of the world, but I feel like he just dies to a Dragonfire, and then you don't have to worry about the damage on him. Mickey Mouse, one of our first spoileds, and one of our Disney 100 promos. I think this card is similar in the deck that Christopher Robin is in. Whenever this character quests, you may pay 3 less for the next character you play this turn. 6 ink, inkable, very good. 1/6 stat line is nice, and quests for 3, which I like a lot more. I like it a little better than Christopher Robin. This Mufasa is very good, especially in decks that already want to be playing just in time. A lot of these princesses decks that have a lot of very powerful 5-cost cards, Mufasa being 5-cost here is very important. His 3/3 stat line checks a lot of useful things. Actually, the stat lines across this new set are not very large. This Mulan has support. I think she's not good. She doesn't shift well with our Shift Mulan, who's up next. And support is not... I'm not convinced support is good as of yet. Even with the new cards for the support archetype, I'm not convinced it's very playable right now. Mulan here, our Shift Mulan. She shift 2s. We don't have a 1-mana Mulan yet. And whenever she quests, she does a similar thing to the Mufasa. Whenever she quests, you reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a song, you can play it, otherwise it stays on top of your deck. She quests for 2. She's a princess, so I think she works pretty well in like a songs princess deck, especially if you're in like blue yellow, where you can be singing Just in Time, or sorry, Let It Go, as well as all your yellow songs. Nana is the first of our cards that care about Floodborns. So she says, whenever you play a Floodborn, you move all damage from chosen character. I guess it's not great. This is probably starter deck, honestly. Piglet is cute, and he's a 3-mana card that quests for 2. He's a 2/4, 3 ink, sorry. He quests for 2. Shift Rapunzel. Just Shift Rapunzel is very strong. All of our strong princesses capping out at 5 ink is very important. I think that this is a big buff to the princesses deck, especially the blue-yellow version of the princesses deck, who already wants to do a lot of healing with things like Jasmine. She has Shift 3, so you can shift her on top of your smaller Rapunzels, like the 2-mana Rapunzel, or 2 ink Rapunzel that we're about to see. I'll just put them next to each other. The big Rapunzel says, whenever you heal one of your characters, you draw a card, and this Rapunzel says, tap to heal a character for 2 damage. She has 4 health. This one has 4 health. This one has 6, so they're both really hard to kill in one hit. If your opponent does not commit multiple attackers to them, you're just going to heal them up and draw a million cards off of it. Back to some of our 7 dwarves. Sleepy is he's a 2/3 for 2 that quests for 2, but he enters play exerted. This is a little more playable than all the other dwarves in like a generic value deck, but even then I don't think it's crazy strong. Sleepy says, whenever you play this character or another 7 dwarf, one of your dwarves or one of your opponent's characters gets -1 attack this turn. Don't really like that. This Snow White says, whenever you play this character, you heal 2 damage from a character. There's a 1-mana Jasmine that does this as well at 1 mana. One thing to point out from all of our Amber cards so far, all of these cards are inkable. Very cool. Really like to see Amber really kind of define itself as you are never going to run out of uninkable cards if you are in Amber. You will always have inkable cards, so that you can be playing your cards. Really cool thing to notice right away. Snow White says you can pay 1 less to play all your 7 dwarves. Even if these were all 1 less natively and you had this on the board, I still don't think they're really worth it. We've got the Shift Snow White that shifts 4. We don't have a 3-mana Snow White. Whenever this character quests, you can return a character from your discard to your hand. I think it might go in the yellow big dudes archetype or yellow slam bunch of dudes archetype that these guys and like the Surfer Stitch are in. You don't want too many of these effects because they're pretty expensive. She's also uninkable. You kind of need to be shifting her. She quests for 2. She's a princess. Then we've got the 5 ink, the Queen, that comes from the starter deck. She says shift 2, which is crazy because now we have a 1 ink Queen. Before we had a 1 ink Queen, this card was actually quite bad. Now that we have a 1 ink Queen, playing this thing on turn 2 is insane. Its effects are not very good. Whenever it quests, one of your characters gets +4 attack, and one of your opponent's characters gets -4 attack. That's not super relevant. She quests for 2 on turn 2 as a 4/3. Your opponent has to smash this in order to live. And the Queen being a 1 ink 2/2, that's just like there's decks that are just already playing 1 ink 2/2s. We've got Hold Still, 2 ink, remove 4 damage from 1 character. I think this is not good. The healing deck really wants characters on board that do your healing so that when the characters take damage, they can heal themselves. We've got Last Stand. This is good because now yellow gets some good removal. We'll go ahead and cheat a little bit and throw World's Greatest Criminal Mind up there as well. So Last Stand says, banish chosen character who is challenged this turn, which means you can attack in with your Mufasa, crash in, or attack in with a Rapunzel so that you can heal it up, then kill your opponent's big dude. Amber has had big trouble killing big dudes. They don't really have much removal, and so this kind of helps solve a little bit of that problem. Same with World's Greatest Mind. It's 3 mana. It is a song, which is very nice at lining up 3 mana very well with Cinderella. Banish chosen character with 5 attack or more. I could see this as a 2 or 3 of in the decks that are expecting to have medium to poor matchups against control decks. In my testing, I like to play a lot of low to the ground, kind of faster medium range decks. This card was not showing up much, but if you're playing against those control decks with those top end big carries, this card is going to be showing up a lot more, and it's inkable. So if you're not in those matchups, you just throw it down and you're good to go. Painting the Roses Red is a 2 ink song. Up to 2 chosen characters get -1 attack this turn. Draw a card. I think if you're singing this, it's very good. If you're not singing this card is very bad. I'm going to throw it good in Archetype for that reason. It says draw a card on it, and that's the only reason I'm even considering it, and it's inkable. Zero to Hero is insane. Zero to Hero is one of our craziest new cards. It's one of our first wave of cards spoiled. I thought it was going to be a pretty high risk, high reward. If you build your deck around it, there's no risk. It's insane. It's a 2 ink uninkable song, which is already pretty good if it's a song. You count the number of characters you have in play, and you pay that amount of ink less for the next character you play this turn. You basically turn all of your guys into mana or ink, but you don't have to tap all of them. You just sing it with Cinderella. This card is crazy in any deck that can play a 2-drop, like your Simba can sing this. You can just you just throw it in the old deck, right? Throw Lilo turn 1, Simba turn 2, sing this on turn 3, play a 5-drop. On turn 3, win the game. This thing is like a more flexible just in time that's cheaper and can be sung. This card is crazy strong. Next up, we got Dragon Gem. So this says an item that is 3 ink, uninkable. It says tap and 3 ink, return a character from your discard to your hand. It's a lie. It says return a character with support from your discard to your hand. So it's very bad. If it said return a character from discard to hand, not be bad. Not be that bad. It has to grab a supporter. It's not good. Sleepy's Flute. I think this is interesting in the Songs deck. I've been messing around with it a little bit. I feel like it's a little too slow in the Songs deck I like to play, but in some other kind of slower, grindier, mid-range control style Songs decks, this could be a little more relevant. Next up, moving on to Amethyst. Arthur, with a new archetype introduced in this set, the Self-Bounce archetype. This is a lot of lore that you can get from one character quite early, though I'm not yet convinced of its power. We did a little bit of playtesting with this card and this archetype. It feels a little weak to me. Next up, we've got the Blue Fairy, 2 ink, 1/1 with evasive, so it doesn't really matter that she's only a 1/1 except for the steel decks. This card is very strong. I like this card a lot. There's a lot of new Floodborns in this set. In the first set, we only have 2 from each color. In this set, I think we have at least 3 from each color. This is a very nice effect to be able to draw lots of cards very quickly. Chip the Teacup is our 1 ink 2/2. He's our Archimedes of this set. Starter deck. 4 ink Dr. Facilier. This guy's interesting because our Dr. Facilier from the first set, our 7 ink Dr. Facilier, is a shift 5, and this guy is 4, so you can kind of cut him out, cut the other 3 ink Facilier for this one. However, this thing only has 2 health, so it dies to cannons, even though it has evasive, so it's more likely to live a turn. You're not going to be tapping it, because you're just going to be shifting on it. So it dies to cannons, it dies to smash, it dies to some of the new steel removal. Moving up next, we got Elsa. As beautiful as this Elsa is, and as cute as its art is in the Disney 100, it is a starter deck card. This card's not good. Fairy Godmother, big Fairy Godmother. We've got, it has no stat, it has no effect text. I think it's not very good. 3/7 is interesting on a 5 ink card, but it's not amazing. Next up, we've got our Shift Fairy Godmother. This is another one of those cards that shifts way lower than the standard is. The standard shift cost is 2 less than your casting cost. This one is a 5 ink card that shifts for 2. Now, we don't have any 1 ink Fairy Godmothers right now, so it's not going to be really taking advantage of that shift stat, but something to keep an eye on in the future. We've also got our 3 ink Fairy Godmother that you're assumedly supposed to be shifting the big one on top of, but I don't really know if that's going to be happening. That says, whenever you play a character named Cinderella, you exert an opponent character. This is not good. Then we've got Hi Hi. I think this character is a cool casual character. When it's banished in a challenge, you can return it to your hand. So it kind of does the Mickey Brooms thing while Mickey's on board, but by itself. So I don't think it's terribly strong, but it's not bad. And I think it's cool. We get a cool little Phoenix-looking Hi-Hi. Jiminy Cricket, he has evasive, and he says, whenever you play this character, if you have a Pinocchio in play, you may draw a card. The Pinocchios are decent. I don't really like this guy. Next up, we've got Llama Kuzco. When this character is banished, you may draw a card. I think this card is pretty decent, actually. I haven't really found a spot to throw it into any of my deck lists that I've been making in the new set, though I think it might just be because I haven't been playing him. He's probably very strong. Next up, we've got our Madam Mims. So all of our Madam Mims here, we've got 4 Madam Mims. 3 of the Madam Mims, not the shift one actually, all say when you play this character, you must banish them unless you return another character you control to your hand, and then they're all slightly overstated for their costs. So our Fox Mim here is a 3 ink 4/3 with Rush, where you have to bounce another guy to your hand. I think this is decent in the self-bounce archetype. It being 3 ink is not ideal for me. It having Rush is not bad. I actually don't hate this one as much. Then we've got Big Dragon Mim. Big Dragon Mim has evasive and quests for 4 and is 7 ink, so it's reminding me a lot of our BLT Mickey from the first set. It is a 5/7 with evasive, so it's got a really big booty, so basically the only way to kill this thing is with a Dragon Fire or a Be Prepared or similar effects. It does quest for 4, which is a shit ton, but when you play it, you have to bounce 2 of your characters to your hand or it dies. I think in full build-around decks for this card being your top end, I think this could replace or work alongside the Shift Elsa from the first set. It being inkable is very nice. If this was not inkable, I think this would be a lot worse card. Then we've got our Shift Mim. I think our Shift Mim is decent. She says Shift 3, so she does shift onto our Snake Mim, which I do think is actually pretty strong. I'll go ahead and throw it up there. I'll talk about it in a minute. So she comes down on turn 3 if you're shifting her. So this combos pretty well with a lot of our Merlins who get effects when they enter and leave the battlefield. I think she's interesting in the self-bounce deck. I don't think she's terribly strong, and she honestly might get cut from those decks. Moving on to our Snake Mim. 2 ink to be able to bounce one of your other guys to your hand for a 3/3. If this quested for 2, I think I'd really, really like it. It only quests for 1, however. You can use it on your Merlins for only 2 ink to be able to bounce into hand. I like this Madam Mim a lot more, even though it has slightly worse stats than the Fox Mim. I actually like this one a little bit more. more. Then we've got our Merlins. Now, some of these Merlins are really good. Some of these Merlins are really bad. We're going to talk about one of the really bad ones. And I'm not even going to put it up here, go to an archetype, because I think this card is really bad. Play anything else. This card, play any other 3/3 for 3 that has no text is probably better than this. It's not really, but like, you know, this effect almost never comes up, in my opinion. Then we've got Goat Merlin. Goat Merlin is pretty strong. He has 4 ink for a 4/3, decent on stats. When he enters or leaves play, you gain 1 lore. This combos incredibly well with our Merlin, especially on curve. You can play Merlin on 3, then play Goat Merlin on 4, gain 1 lore for him playing, then quest with Merlin to gain 1 lore, then bounce the Goat Merlin to your hand to gain 2 extra lore from Arthur's effect. Then when the Goat Merlin bounces to hand, you gain another lore. So that is 5 lore on turn 4. Then we've got Rabbit Merlin. I think Rabbit Merlin is actually a decent amount weaker. He is a 2/3 instead of a 4/3. He is still 4 ink. He is uninkable, which is pretty brutal, especially in that deck. And when he enters or leaves play, he draws a card. Now, in the self-bounce deck, I think he's actually not great. In a control deck, I think he's actually pretty incredible. Because when he enters, you draw a card, so he does his best little Maleficent impression. And also when he leaves play, he draws a card. So he always replaces himself, and he always goes +1. Even if your opponent bounces it to hand, or like shuffles it into deck or something like that, like he's always going to draw you, he's always going to replace himself and get something else. Then we've got our Shapeshifter Merlin. I'm not sure as of recording right now if we have confirmation if this works with like the Magic Brooms or with the big Dr. Facilier. My intuition says that it should, and if it doesn't, this Merlin is really bad. I'm going to assume that it does, and even then, in his own self-bounce deck, he's not very strong. Then we've got Squirrelin. Squirrelin is a 2 mana or 2 ink 2/1 that does his best version of scrying. He does his best little Yzma impression. It's 2 ink, so that's not bad, especially since our other good self-bounce targets are at 4 ink. So having it at 2 is pretty decent, because then you can follow up with your Mim, get some scrying, fix your draws. Next up, we've got Peter Pan's Shadow. I think this card is interesting. I don't know if this is good, though. He's 4 ink, uninkable, 2/3 the quest for 2. He's a little confused. He's evasive with the quest for 2, which is good because he's got evasive. We like evasives at quest for 2. However, he has rush, and he's a 2/3. I don't know if I'm ever attacking with a 2/3, especially on turn 4. That doesn't seem very good. Your other characters with rush gain evasive, but a lot of characters with rush want to be attacking, not questing. So I think that this card is a pretty decent casual card. I don't know if it's terribly actually that competitive. Pinocchio. Pinocchio is very interesting. 2 ink, uninkable, 1/1 that quests for 3. This so far is our best quest for cost on rate, up there with the Maleficents and Leelas. Now, if it had 2 health, I'd like it a lot more, because there's a lot of things in this set that deal 1 damage in steel, like I keep saying. We'll get to them at the end. I think this Pinocchio is very like high risk, high reward, where if you can put this, you go Leela or Maleficent and then Pinocchio, your opponents are losing the game, unless they can deal with it very quickly. Speaking of Pinocchio, another really good reason to play that Pinocchio is the Shift Pinocchio. 5 ink, uninkable is a little rough for a 3/3 that quests for 2, but he shifts 3. So you can just kick your opponent's stuff or their items, which is very nice, back to their hand. I think the ideal shift target is going to be this Pinocchio. When you play this character, you may exert charge an opposing character. 2 ink, uninkable for a 1/1. You play him, you tap their thing down, and then next turn, and maybe you kill it, maybe you do something with it. I'm not really convinced on these kind of on-play effects, because this thing can't attack that turn. Then we've got Winnie the Pooh. Listen, he's the Honey Wizard, and I love that for him. However, he is a 5/5 that quests for 2. 5. Not very good. I love Winnie the Pooh. He's very cool. This is a playmat that I will be getting. This is a very cool playmat. He's not very good. Yzma, we've got our Shift Yzma, who shifts 4. Now, we do have a 3 ink Yzma in this set coming up. However, I think this Yzma is interesting. I'll throw it a good in archetype. Another one of our shift characters that has an on-play effect. So you can be stacking your shift Yzmas on top of each other so that you can keep getting her on-play effect, similar to how we were doing with the big Elsa from the first set. We have a Yzma to shift down onto. This Yzma has no effect, though. It is a 3/4 for 3 that quests for 1, which is nice because it lives a lot of the steel removal. And then the shift Yzma is a 4/4, so its health doesn't drop, which is nice. So I think that these actually can stick together. I think these are interesting to play around with. I personally have not been messing around with them, but I'm not convinced that it's bad by any means. Gruesome and Grim. I think Gruesome and Grim is not actually very good. Gruesome and Grim is very cool. I think that you can do some very splashy things with it. I think because your guy dies at the end of the turn, you lose a lot of board advantage that you would even potentially gain. Next up, we've got I'm Stuck. Chosen exerted character can't ready at the start of the next turn. It's cute, and it's Winnie the Pooh, so I'm going to throw it in casual. This is not a good card. This, realistically, if I'm being objective here, should go with starter deck. You know what? We've got Winnie the Pooh there. We'll throw the 2 Winnie the Poohs next to each other. Legend of the Sword and the Stone. 2 ink, inkable song. Chosen character gets Challenger 3 this turn. We all know how I feel about Challenger on effects and attack stats not really mattering right now, especially in the game. I don't think this is very strong. Binding Contract. 4 ink, inkable. You tap this and one of your characters to exert chosen character. It turns any of your guys into the 3 ink Elsa from the first set, but it is 4 ink and it's an uninkable item. And for that reason, I think it's a casual play. Croquet Mallet. I'm probably saying that wrong. 1 ink uninkable item. I think this is a better version of the White Rabbit's Pocket Watch. You play it down early, you get your item synergies if you're in blue, and then you just pop it, and one of your guys gains rush this turn to start attacking right away. Really put pressure on the board. You kind of always have constant threat on your opponent's tapped guys because it's so cheap, and it's already on the board. All right, Perplexing Signposts. This is interesting. It's cute in the self-bounce deck because it kind of sits on the board. It solves some of the problems with the self-bounce deck for you have to commit a bunch of mana in order to do your bouncing thing, and then you have to recommit your guy onto your board with mana that you just spent. So I think it's cute in the self-bounce deck. I'm not convinced that deck is very strong still, but it's decent. Then we've got the Sorcerer's Spellbook. Okay, this card is broken. This card is one of the standout cards from this set. If you are not a control player, you might not understand this. If you are a control player, this is your best friend. It's not your best friend this set, it's your best friend by set 4. This is the just-in-time of this set. This card will be broken as hell. This card will be in one of the best decks. It doesn't have all the tools for it yet. If we get enough removal, which it looks like we're going to at the speed of this game, where you can just play all dudes and all actions that just kill your opponent's stuff, and it's in purple, so you're staying up on card advantage with all the card draw that purple has, we could realistically see a deck that never quests their guys and gains lore off of the Sorcerer's Spellbook only. This will be a very powerful card in the future. It is not yet. So keep it, there's a little asterisk on this guy. So now, working on to our Emerald. Emerald has some really cool cards in this set. Some of the most powerful cards in this set that I'm most excited to build around are in Emerald. And speaking of which, this is not one of them. We have Arthur. He's a hero, not even a prince, so we don't get any prince synergies. I know it's Arthur, but like, you know, he becomes a prince and a king later, right? Beast. This beast is insane. 6 ink beast, 4/5, quests for 2. Whenever any opposing character is damaged, you may ready this character. This thing is insane. So, bare minimum, you can just attack with it, and then your opponent's character is damaged, and then you ready him. And then you can attack with it again, and then your opponent's character gets damaged, and then you ready him again. And you keep attacking with him. And maybe he kills himself, but you've also killed like 2 or 3 of your opponent's small guys. 4 or 5 of their small guys. They're really small. This is incredible. Also, when paired with a bunch of steel, like 1 damage pinging stuff that we have from this set and from the previous set, you can quest for like 6, 8, 10 in the same turn because he quests for 2, which is too much. Also, when paired with a bodyguard, if he is exerted and you have a bodyguard exerted, your opponent attacks into your bodyguard. Oh, look, your bodyguard did damage back to them. Now your beast is unexerted and they can't attack it. He has 5 health, so he lives a lot of the steel damage based on removal. You have to just straight kill this guy. This thing cannot live a turn cycle. If a deck is playing this and they're built around it, they will win the turn they untap with this. This card is insane. This is one of the strongest cards in this set, and I'm very excited to talk about it and brew around it in the coming months. Next up, we've got Belle. Small Belle here, goes in our discard archetype. I think she's actually one of the weaker cards of the discard archetype, so I'm going to throw her down here. I think you play her if you're in discard, but I'm not convinced she's terribly strong. There are definitely a lot of other cards that I'm way more happy to see in my discard deck than her, mostly because she's uninkable. Speaking of another Belle, this is the crazy Belle that everybody was popping off of during original spoiler season. This is a shift 3 Belle. We don't have any 2 ink Bells, thank God, but she has 5 ink, so you could play her off of just in time, just like every other broken 5 cost in the game. Looking at you, Mufasa, looking at you, Rapunzel. This card is crazy. She quests for 3. She's a 3/3. Thank God she dies to Smash. There would be no God in this universe if she doesn't die to Smash. One interesting thing to notice is I believe this is the only case. It's the only one that I've spotted so far. If you shift this Belle onto the other Belle from this set, she actually loses health. So if there was 3 damage marked on this Belle, she's alive. If you shift it, she instantly dies, which is interesting. 0 to Hero playing her on turn 3, Just in Time playing her on turn 3. She is psychotic. This Belle is insane. An entire deck around herself, even if there wasn't more discard support, but there is in Bucky. Bucky is really good. She's Floodborn. Make them discard cards. She's Floodborn. There's other green cards in the discard archetype are Floodborn. There's 2 other green discard cards in this archetype that are both Floodborn that work crazy well with Bucky. Bucky is really, really, really strong. One of the better cards in the discard deck, to the point where I'm thinking about putting him up here. If discard is as strong of a deck as it looks like it is, Bucky is a 4 of in all of those decks. So I think I'm actually pretty comfortable putting him up here. Cheshire Cat, we have a new Cheshire Cat, a 2 ink Cheshire Cat of a 3/2 that only quests for 1. Not very good, throwing it down there. This Cheshire Cat is very interesting. He is in the build around for the green steel archetype that this beast goes into. He is a shift 5 for an 8 ink Cheshire Cat, which is a lot. 8 ink shift 5 is very nice because he does discount himself by 3, which is cute. So I like this card a lot. I think that it's going to be a big build around backup win condition to this beast in the steel green decks. Very strong card, like it a lot. Next up, we've got Daisy Duck. In my opinion, for the discard deck, she comes out a little slow. I found myself having her in my hand and not really playing her often when I was playtesting our discard deck, because either your opponent has no cards in hand by the time she's questing, or isn't doing enough on your turn 4, because you have things like You Have Forgotten Me that are in the first set that are going to be taking up priority for your 4-ink slot either way, or this Donald Duck, and I think he's actually come down here. He's good in the discard deck only. Oh no, I'm giving my opponent a card in their hand, but it's okay because I'm just going to make them discard it. And in the discard deck, you get extra value from actively making your opponent discard cards, so they will eventually start to play around you by just inking their whole hand or playing all their stuff out. And this allows you to put another card in their hand if you're able to force them into it. And if not, they're just going to not opt to take it because they're going to try and play around all your discard stuff, and then you're going to be drawing 2 cards to 1 every turn. So this card is very nice. Then we've got our 3-ink Donald Duck. I think this card is not good. Whenever you play an action, this character gets +2 attack this turn. He is a 0/5. He has a Wacky Challenger. I don't think he's very good. We've got our other 7-ink Dr. Facilier, but this guy does not shift. He has evasive and he quests for 3. He's only a 4/4, which is a little worrying for an evasive that's cost 7 ink. And whenever he quests, shows an opposing character can't quest during their next turn. So he's like an evasive, more expensive, quest for a little bit more John Silver. I'm actually not that impressed with John Silver after playing him a little bit more. I think this is a casual card. Enchantress. Enchantress is very cool in some of these like kind of more aggro, like the yellow-green aggro deck that we've been seeing out of set 1 with your Lilos and your Kuzcos. I think she goes really well into that archetype. She is eaten alive a little bit by the steel decks that deck kind of has a problem with, but I think that this deck is still pretty nice. Flynn Rider. Flynn Rider is a 1-ink 1/3. He has no effect. He's our resident Olaf for this set. Then we've got Flynn Rider, our 4-ink Flynn Rider. This guy does shift too, so you can shift it onto this 1-ink Flynn Rider, though I found myself not wanting to play this card because it's not very good. He only quests for 4 if your opponent has no cards in hand. Now, because of that, he goes into the discard deck, obviously. This card is very strong. When your opponent's trying to play around your discard by having no cards in hand, you just quest for 4 on them and win the game instantly. Next up, we got the Gaston. He also goes in our discard archetype. Main problem with the discard deck is that they have a problem fighting for the board, and he does help fight for the board. So I think you could throw him a couple into that discard deck. He's inkable, so you can always throw him down if you need to. Not the end of the world. Little John, 6/6 for 6 that quests for 2. Not very good. Lucifer. Lucifer goes into our discard deck. I think this card could see play outside of discard decks. Also being 5 ink if you're already in green for the spell. If you're like in a green-yellow value deck, like a more mid-range value deck where you're playing just in time, this card comes in those decks. Then we've got Pain and Panic. So this is part of our support archetype for this set, where you want to support a bunch of your characters to give them a bunch of attack, and then they quest for a bunch or gain a bunch of extra effects. I think this card's not very good. Then we've got Panic. This is too much investment. This guy's uninkable. I don't really like it. Next up for the same archetype, we've got Pete. He's a bad guy. You need to buff him by 4 attack, so you can do some like cute pain stuff with it. I have not found this to be terribly convincing. He has ward, which is nice, admittedly, but you still need like other stuff to be going right. And if you're using him to sing, then you can't quest. So I found it underwhelming, we'll say. Prince John. Prince John is incredible. Prince John is the entire reason to build the discard deck. You combine it with You Have Forgotten Me, Perfect Curve, 3/4. Your opponent discards 2 cards. You draw 2 more cards. You've got Bucky sitting on the board. You play him. You play a Flynn Rider. Your opponent discards a card. You draw a card. You have Bucky sitting on the board. You play this guy. You have him sing Hypnotize, which we'll look in a minute. Your opponent discards a card. You draw a card. You draw another card because they discarded a card. Prince John is insane. Prince John really keeps the gas up on the discard deck. It's so good. Queen of Hearts. I don't think she's very good. She could see play theoretically in the green steel, like ping your opponent's guys deck. I don't really see it. I think that that deck really values a bunch of different opponent characters having 1 or 2 damage on it. But if you're in a budget version of that deck, I don't hate it. So that's why I'll throw her here in casual. Ratigan is he's just going to die. If you had Ward, I might like it a little differently, actually, because he's like an interesting attacker that has like a questing backup option. As evasive, you're basically just questing with him. Opponents can't really kill him. We know what happens to low health evasive guys. They get shot in the face with steel. Ray, he has evasive, which is cool. And so I'll throw him in casual, I think. I don't really want to be using just in time on this guy. I'm not going to lie to you. Next up, we got this is a way that if your opponent is able to keep up on their hand resources, your Flynn Riders aren't dead in hand. You can still kind of cheat them out almost with the Queen to play the Queen on 3, then on turn 4, quest out, like pseudo, you discard the Flynn Rider and quest for 4, gain 4 lore anyways. Tiana, so I think she goes pretty decently into a green-yellow princesses deck. Tiana and Belle are both princesses, so they both work really well with Moana for that reason. And they're both 5, so they get showed out on just in time. Next up, we've got Verana. If she has no effect, I'm going to throw her in casual just because she's a good just in time target. Just in time is just so strong. I think we're actually going to drop you down here as well. Not there. Just in time is just so strong that anything that costs 5, you have to be thinking about it. Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo. Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo is incredible. it's fun to say, bibbidi bobbidi boo. You can return a card to your hand and then play that exact same card down. So this sees play in the self bounce deck with these Merlins, where these Merlins can sing bibbidi bobbidi boo to bounce themselves and get their leaves play and enters play trigger again, and then when they die or get bounced by something else, get their leaves play trigger again. I think this card is really, really good. So much so that I think I'm going to put it up here. Green is really showing out. Emerald is really, really, really showing out in this set. Next up, we've got Bounce. It's kind of like a weird, sometimes good in the right decks or situations, sometimes bad. Mother Knows Best. And Mother Knows Best is decent. Green doesn't really have much removal, so they'll take what they can get. Hypnotize I think is pretty good. It replaces itself and rips a card out of your opponent's hand. We love to see those kinds of effects in the discard deck specifically. That's why Lucifer and Belle and Bucky and Prince John are also strong in that deck, is because I think we're gonna throw that up there. Improvise, I'm gonna throw it in casual. I don't think it's very good, but it says draw a card on it. And so in some like future combo deck that maybe is already playing green for trying to enable some combos, you can like do some cool looping things with this card at the beginning of the game. Pack Tactics. This goes in our steel green ping a bunch of things deck that commit a bunch of guys that all have 5 health, and you slam and grab your swords off of a song, off of a singer. You can then just play Pack Tactics and instantly win the game. Next up, we've got Ring the Bell. I think that this could see play in the steel green ping archetype, though you have other ways like this big Cheshire Cat. Also just like deal more damage to it. It'll die that way. Radigan's Marvelous Trap rounding out our Emerald here. I am actually not a big fan of lose lore stuff outside of multiplayer. In multiplayer, this card's incredible. This card's insane. But I think that in standard 1v1s, this card is not actually that good. A lot of the lose lore stuff just stalls the game. Next up, we've got Baloo, a 3-ink, inkable 4/3 that quests for 1. That guy has no effect. Next up, we've got Bone, a 2-ink, inkable 2/3. It's cute that it's a 2/3 for 2, but he has no effect, so I don't think it's very good. Then we've got Card Soldiers, a 5-ink, 5/5 that quests for 2. Has a little bit more reason to be played. I don't really think that Yellow-Red is going to be building on a just-in-time deck. There's not a crazy amount of 5-cost cards, but because of that, for other reasons that we've said as well, we'll throw that up. Donald Duck, which is a cool way to attempt to counter the green-purple or the green-steel deck. However, it doesn't actually do that because they just banish him because he has evasive, not ward, so it doesn't matter. Felicia. Felicia is actually pretty cool. Pretty cool way to be dealing with those annoying ass Simbas. Checks the Simbas pretty well. I like this card a lot in like a control deck actually. Like a red purple control deck really likes this card. Fidget, 3-ink for a 3/2 with evasive. He only quests for 1. I like my evasive guys to quest for more than 1 because that's their job, is to not be hit in combat, and what's their other job is to quest. If they're not questing for a lot, I don't really like them. Next up, we got Honest John. Whenever you play a Floodborn character, each opponent loses 1 more. He was 3-ink uninkable. I don't think losing more is very good, so he's going down there. Lady Tremaine, shift 4, which is cool. I think this is cute because it gets around ward. So if we see a big resurgence in green ward stuff, like there's ways to play around that as the green ward deck, and I don't think this card is strong enough to really force them off of it, but I'm going to hesitantly throw it in good in archetype because I think it's interesting. Small Tremaine, even if they didn't have that restriction on it, I think this would not be very good. Lumiere. Now, I have a 5-cost 5/5 to quest for 2 here. Why is this thing not quest for 3? I can't even play it with just in time. Bad. Minnie Mouse. Minnie Mouse is actually not awful. She has evasive. She quests for 2. She's inkable. She's a 1/3. She dies to smash, but you know what? Not bad. We also have Diver Minnie. Has a shift 2. Even if she said if you only play 1 action in the turn, she wouldn't be very good. 2 actions? Very not good. Do not like that Minnie, unfortunately. 2-ink 3/2 Minnie Mouse with no effect. Dies to fire the cannons. Dies to all the steel stuff. Not very good. No effect. No pressure. Mother Gothel. Mother Gothel is very cute. Specifically in the way that it plays with the old sets Rapunzel. This character enters the play with 3 damage on her, which is exactly how much Rapunzel heals, which is very cute. And so I'm going to throw it as good in archetype because it synergizes with that Rapunzel so incredibly well. Then we've got our new Mulan. It's like a bad Zeus. But it's like in red. It's like a bad Maui. It's uninkable. I think this card's a casual card. Unfortunately, the art is really cool. I'm glad we have sleeves of this card because this card is really cool. I don't think it's very strong though. Next up, we've got Namari. Uninkable. I don't think she's very good. I think she could see some play. I don't think she's very good. Queen of Hearts. I think this is actually not good. Anytime that I'm looking at this card, I'm just looking at our little cat mouse friend thing over here, and I'm like, this card's just so much better. It's 1 ink less. It attacks for 1 more. I don't care that it has 1 less health. It's gonna die in combat immediately. This is fine. Queen of Hearts, our 5-ink big shift Queen of Hearts. This potentially goes in the same archetype as our Sorcerer's Spellbook over here, where you don't need to be questing, but you do still need to keep up on cards. You can draw cards this way. This actually also combos with Shere Khan, who I will cheat and jump ahead a little bit. This Shere Khan right here. It's just when you challenge, you don't have to actually kill them for either of these effects, which is really cool. This deck kind of wants to go wide on a lot of characters that want to be attacking very much. Plays a lot of these rush characters. Currently, I'm not convinced that deck is terribly strong right now, which is why I'm still waiting a couple sets for this to really like break this card and really build that deck. But we have the inklings of some very powerful stuff coming out of this set for it, as well as some useful stuff from the first set. I just don't think it's really pushing the level it needs to be at right now to really break into the meta in a meaningful way. We got Radagan. This is a lot of text for something that requires a lot of setup. Your opponent has to have something with 3 power or less. You have to have a guy with attack greater than or equal to that guy's toughness. You have to already have a guy on board. He's only a 3/3. Next up, we got Raya, our 3-ink Raya. Very important because we have a shift 4 Raya, but otherwise I'm not really convinced of this character's effect. I think she's interesting. I'm only going to put her here because this Raya is actually pretty good. As is, you can like attack with the Raya, kill something small, or if they just have like 1 or 2 attack, ping them, maybe untap her somehow else, then shift this Raya on top. She's untapped, you attack the thing that you just dealt damage with your Raya, and then you kill it, you take no damage back, you still have some damage marked on you, so you're probably gonna die, you only quest for 2. That's why I think I think he's actually a little more casual. I think they did a little bit more build around than we have right now. Next up, we got our other Raya, 4-ink Raya for a 5/3, quest for 1. Doesn't do any of the cool stuff this Raya does. Costs 2 less, but when you're shifting it, costs the same. We got Big Scar. All right, Big Scar. I wish this thing could shift. It does not. It says Rush. I don't think he's very good. He's cute. I don't think he's very good. I think if you're playing a top-end control deck like this, any of your other... I think Ursula's better than this card. I think Ursula's really bad. Like, any of your other top-end stuff in the first set or this set is going to be better than this thing. We've got Tigger. There's a second Tigger. I think he's not very good, though. Meh. Next up, we've got Tuk Tuk. Tuk Tuk has Reckless. He's a 4/5 for 4 with Reckless. I like this a lot better than our other Reckless guys. I wish he had Rush. And speaking of that, I thought he had Rush. He's actually going down here. He can't attack right away. He's not great. He doesn't quest for much. He's got decent stats. He's uninkable. Not really a big fan. Next up, we got Go the Distance. Pretty nice. Like that a lot in Archetype. This also plays well with our Queen of Hearts and our Shere Khan for attacking lots of times. This is clearly what Red wants to be doing. They want to be attacking a lot. We already knew that, but it's nice to see that reinforced. Next up, we got Teeth and Ambition. 2-ink also Song. However, you have to hit one of your own guys. There's ways to make this work, though I'm not terribly convinced of its usefulness yet. Next up, we got the Most Diabolical Scheme. Another song. Getting a lot of songs in Red, which is nice, because Red didn't have many useful songs outside of, like, Be Prepared, which is so much mana. So it's nice to see Red get some cheap songs. I don't think that Villain's deck is terribly strong, even with this card, so I'm going to throw it in casual. Next up, we got What Did You Call Me? Our first non-song action from Red. Don't care about that. Then we've got You Can Fly, our last action for Red, but it's also a song. Interesting card. Not terribly convinced that it's good. Dinner Bell. I'm going to hesitantly throw this as good in Archetype as a, like, it feels like it wants to be a quote-unquote, like, sideboard-ish, sideboardable kind of counter to green steel decks. There's no sideboard in the game. And so your sideboard cards, quote, you want to be, like, inkable. This is not inkable. I think this has potential in the future, but I'm not convinced it's very good right now. Peter Pan's Dagger. I feel like this has to go in good in Archetype just because, like, all your evasives get a buff that's, like, meaningful. Actually, no, it's not. They get +1 attack. That's not meaningful. They can't attack them. Like, this is an aggressive evasive deck. This card is actually bad. This is not doing what evasives do. I thought it said Rush. It was bad. Not good card. Anyways, Sword in the Stone. I kind of like this a little bit more than Dinner Bell. They're in combat, especially with a lot of the red guys that like to be attacking and kind of untapping themselves and getting back in. You can kind of get a little bit extra reach. Cost 1, it's uninkable. You don't really want this in multiples. So because of that, I am dropping it down to casual. All right, moving into the back third of our colors, we've got Alice. This Alice is the payoff for the support deck. So I'm going to have to throw her as good in Archetype, even though I don't think this deck is very good right now. I'm willing to be wrong. And to show respect to you support players, I will throw her in good in Archetype. Next up, we got Basil, which is cool. Especially since we have a 4-ink Basil that is like decent. It's a 3/4, so it's not going to die to a lot of the steel removal. You're going to require multiple cards to kill it. Quest for 2, and then Basil comes in with the same stats, but quest for another one. You play your Basil, you shift your big Basil, draw 2 cards, quest 3. Seems decent. This Basil is kind of bad. It's a 2/2 for 2 that quests for 1 and has support. I'll throw it in casual, hesitantly. Don't feel like I should, but I will, just for you. Caterpillar. To me, this feels very similar to our Pinocchio, which means that it goes up here because our big Pinocchio, the quest for 3, is up here. It comes in turn earlier than the Pinocchio, or turn later, sorry, than the Pinocchio. You can ink it, which is nice, and has more toughness. We got Cogsworth. He's a shift 3, he has Ward, and all your other characters gain resist 1. This is interesting, so I'm going to throw it there with this Cogsworth, who I think is bad, but is a good shift target, because he's shift 3 and this thing costs 2. Cruella. I'm not a big fan of the characters that can attack evasive guys, especially since he's only a 3/2. Not very good. Then we've got Shift Cruella. I think this card is bad. So much to the point that I think about dropping this one, but nope, we won't. This card is just bad. Duke Weaselton, which is interesting. At least he has ward, can't be shot with all the cards that can shoot your guys. He can be inked, so you can have some like play around in a certain matchup. Don't hate it. This Gaston is actually really good. I like this Gaston a lot. So you play him down, you get to replace him, so even if he dies right away, you found more cards. You quest for 3 if you're shifting him. Pretty good. You can also stack him on top of himself to keep drawing cards. Like that a lot. Grand Pobby, he is 7 ink and he is uninkable. So for this fact, I think he's casual. He's super rare, so hopefully he drops in price, but I think he's not great. Hiram Flaversham, cute in the items deck. That's about all there is to say about that. We've got James. He's like a big Grammatala, and Grammatala sees some play, so I'll throw him in casual. Grammatala sees play because she comes out so early. That's when you want your ramp stuff, so he's a little off kilter. Otherwise, I'd throw him up here. He's not exactly when you want him to come out, but he's not bad. Next up, we got Jasmine. I think this Jasmine is actually pretty good, especially in the Healing Princesses deck. This allows you to trigger all of your healing synergies and stuff, and at a pretty decent rate for another princess name, another character name for your shift stuff. Nice card. Next up, we got Judy Hopps. Cool little sideboard tech. She's inkable, so into the really annoying items decks, especially this one that's coming up in the future. She has some good counterplay. She can also be played in the items deck if you want to like churn through your stuff that can get like be brought back and recurred with Tamatoa and other cards we'll see in the future to get extra value. I like that a lot. Mrs. Judson. This is interesting. I think it's an interesting casual card. She's 4 ink. If she was like 2 or 3 and has slightly worse stats and quested for less, I think I'd like her a lot more. She has a James problem where you want your ramp stuff to come out early, not medium game. But she's very cool for what she does. You can ink a lot of cards off her, and she quests for 2. Got a decent stats. Not bad. Nick Wilde. I think Nick Wilde is really cool for the items deck. He's like the Captain Hook from the first set, because Popsicle is an item that only costs 1. Speaking of which, we'll go grab Popsicle now. Popsicle is a 1 ink item, so that's really nice in this like kind of items looping deck that our Zootopia guys are kind of going for right now. It's a cool little combo. I like it a lot. Noe. She quests for 2, which is really cool. You can go Popsicle, then her, then she gets the resist 1 and the ward, so she's really hard to kill. They can't target her with anything, and then she takes a lot less damage. You can start questing for 2. Your item just sits there. You pop the Popsicle, you play Nick, you return the Popsicle in hand, you play the Popsicle again. Noe gets her stats back. Like, she's really cool in the items deck. Next up, we got Mr. Owl. He is our resident 1 ink 2/2 for this set. And we've got Prince Charming, who is our 4 ink 3/3 for this set. He is 4 ink and he does quest for 3, so I'll give him the respect that he deserves in casual. Rabbit here is a 5 ink 4/6 that quests for 2. It's 5, so you can play it off just in time, but if you're in blue, you're in princesses for just in time. This is not making the cut. For Sisu, I think it's casual. It casts Develop Your Brain every time you quest with it. It quests for 2. It's 4 mana. It's uninkable. I don't really like it. We've got the Knock. I think this is a cool little sideboardable slot where like you put it in your main deck, but it's inkable in most matchups, and in the matchups where the ward really matters, it really comes into play and starts like being useful. We got our second Winnie the Pooh. I actually like this a little bit more than our other inkable card or other inkwell cards because it's inkable. Most of our ramp cards are not inkable. And it also quests for 2. I like this Winnie Pooh a lot. I think this can really help buff out some of the ramp decks inconsistency problems, where if you find it late, it still quests for 2. If you find it really early, you can still ink it. If you find it right when you want it, it quests, you get the value off of it. It demands a smash pretty early in order to get 0 value off of it, but even then, you're still trading 1 for 1. Next up, we got Falling Down the Rabbit Hole. This kind of does a similar thing that this guy does, where you force your opponent to choose one of their cards. So if they only are sitting on a Kuzco, you just like play this and they have to ink their Kuzco because they're choosing it. Next up, we got 4 Dozen Eggs, 4 ink song. A lot of our songs breakpoints right now are on singers, and a lot of those singers sing at 3 and sing at 5. You want resist in like a purple deck or a red deck or a steel deck where you're like attacking a lot. So like it can be used on a defensive play, but I'm not terribly convinced of this card yet. Launch is another one of our really good item cards. You can play your Popsicle, draw your card, on turn 3, fling your Popsicle at your opponent, on turn 4, play your Nick Wild, grab your Popsicle back, play more cards, draw more cards. Good little combo. 5 damage here, it goes a long way, especially on 3 ink. Blue's only really good removal before was Let It Go, so this is really, really nice. Being able to shoot a lot of things for 5 damage kills a lot, so that's really nice. Next up, we got Nothing to Hide. This is just Peak from Magic. This is going to go in casual just because it says draw a card on it, so you can do like the looping stuff with our other cards that say draw a card on it. I'm not terribly convinced on this card yet, though. Something useful to keep an eye on. Next up, we got Fang Crossbow. Cool flavor, not a good card. Gumbo Pot. This is basically a wacky dingle hopper. Not very good. We have better healing with the Jasmine and the Rapunzels. Maurice's Workshop. I like this. This is Ursula's shell necklace, but for items. This is really cool. It's 3 ink. It's uninkable. It's just Ursula's shell necklace, but for items. It's a really nice card. And then we've got Sardine Can. This card is interesting, so I'm going to throw it in good in archetype because I'm not sure what to do with it. If your opponent is on like a steel-based removal deck and they don't have good attackers, this wins the game. All right, finally closing it out here a little bit. We're going to our steel for our beast. So Beast here. This goes in our Steel Green Pingers deck, which I think is pretty good. So I'm gonna throw it up here because it's inkable, and I think that archetype's pretty strong. Next up, I think this is pretty bad actually. I'm gonna throw it in casual because it's flashy and it's cool. And like it has scenarios where it'd be useful, but I don't think it's 5 ink beast with a shift 3. I think this card is cute. You play it, and if your opponent doesn't have any ways to deal damage outside of attackers, you just like get to draw a card for free every turn, even if you don't quest with it. And then you can start questing with it for 2. And then if he does have some damage, you start killing your opponent's shit. We got Benja. I like Benja a lot. I was playing the old beast in some of my decks that were really dependent on my opponent not drawing specific items that really kind of screwed me over. And that beast does this effect, but has 1 more attack and costs 2 more. The fact that he's inkable means that he's a really good like quote-unquote sideboard slot, where if you're not into a deck that has annoying items, you just throw them down as your ink. If you are into a deck that has annoying items, you pop those items and you're good to go. Next up, we've got Chief Bogo. Interesting in the Pingers deck because it deals 1 to all of your opponent's stuff. I'm not sure how many Floodborns you're really committing to in that deck, but it's interesting. Then we've got Steel Cinderella. Okay, this Steel Cinderella just does what Simba does. Does what the 1 ink Simba does, which means it's good in archetype. However, her name is Cinderella, which means she's like one of these. All Cinderellas are really good in this set because of Song Girl, Song Sword Cinderella. This card is insane. The way that the math works out on her being a 5/5 and having resist 2 is that she kills and lives over half the characters in the game, and kills and dies with almost the rest of them. There's like 10 or less characters that she can't kill. This card automatically wins you the game if you play it, unless your opponent has exactly like Be Prepared or Fire or Dragon's Fire or some way to kill her without damage. If their only removal is damage based, she wins the game. Also, with 0 to hero, you can play this thing on turn 3. You can play this thing on turn 3. That's insane. That's too much. You cannot play this thing on turn 3. Moving on, we got Diver Donald Duck. He has no effect text. I don't think is very good. We've also got Shia LaBeouf, which I don't think is also very good. He has no effect text. He's cute. He quests for 2. Not the end of the world. This Goofy, I'm going to throw in casual because he is a 10/10 for 9 that quests for 4. One of the few cards that can actually kill the Cinderella, especially in 1 hit. So because of that, I'm going to throw him in casual. Because he's inkable, I'm going to throw him in casual. Actually, I think I'll throw him up here because he's still good in the Steel Blue ramp deck. So I like that. Next up, we got Hercules. Anytime I look at this Hercules, I just kind of compare him to the Cinderella and feel bad. And so I have to throw him in casual, unfortunately. We do have a 2 ink Hercules that has no effect. We'll throw him up next to Hercules because you can shift onto it, but it's not the end of it. It's not very good, admittedly. We've got our Shift Jafar, which is cool because it goes in like our little attacking drawing deck that the red cards are going with. And then this Jafar, during your turn, he gains evasive. I don't like these effects. I don't think they're very good. Krong. So he does the big Tinkerbell thing, but he doesn't shift, and he doesn't ping everything for 1. I think he's actually really bad, especially when comparing him to the big Tinkerbell. Now, if you want a budget option for that big Tinkerbell, because that card's still like $30 or something like that at the time of recording, go for it. This is a great budget alternative for that Tinkerbell, which is why he goes in casual. Lawrence. While this character has no damage, he gets +4 attack, making it a 4/4. This is not good. I think this is really bad. Li Shang. In my opinion, most decks that play evasives play a lot of evasives. So this guy deals with a lot of evasives, whereas a lot of the other cards that I've been saying are kind of bad only deal with 1 or 2 evasives. So this is not good. This is not bad. I like this a lot. Next up, we've got the Magic Broom. We have another broom, and for that alone, I'll be throwing it in casual for our Wizard Mickey. Our Wizard Mickey and our brooms are now a steel purple deck, which is kind of where I was playing those brooms anyways. Namari. This is our good Namari. I like this Namari a lot. It's also the one that got an enchanted, and I like the enchanted art on this card a lot. It's kind of fighting itself with that bodyguard stat. Bodyguard, you kind of want to be just like questing with it to get it into tap mode and not putting damage on it yourself, so that when your opponent has to hit into it, they have to commit more guys. But it can challenge rated characters. And that's an effect that we only see conditionally on this Cinderella, and is an incredibly strong effect. So because of that, I'm going to throw it in good in archetype. Pacha is very cool. He's a very cool character. I like him a lot. He's not good. Prince Naveen is very cool. He's a very cool character. I like him a lot. He is not good. This Queen of Hearts is a 7 ink Queen of Hearts that does not shift. I'm just comparing it to this green beast. It costs 1 more. It has slightly better stats. It quests for less. And has a much harder condition to untap. I think this card is casual, fam. I think that card's not very good. All right, Robin Hood. This card's incredible. This card's insane. This card is good in any steel deck. Every steel deck should be playing this card. This card is so good. It just walls everything. Your opponent, they just can't play cards. You have this on the field, and they just can't play cards. This set's Elsa, but you don't need to build around it. In the steel deck, in the green steel deck, or the green steel deck, he goes crazy. Just in steel control decks in general, he goes crazy. He's so good. Next up, we got the Huntsman. 2 ink quest for 2. Not bad. Maybe in like the Rockstar Stitch decks. Not bad. He's only got 1 health. He dies to our Robin Hood. Not very good. This prince I think is actually really good. We all know how annoying Lilo into Simba is. You can kill the Simba, but the Lilo still quests again, but then you kill the Lilo next turn because they don't have another bodyguard. Now they do with the prince. And he's got resist 1, so he lives some of the stuff that deals with Simba, like this guy. He's got bodyguards, so he comes in tapped. Also, he quests for 2. Simba only quests for 1. Also, he's 3, so he sings better songs than Simba does. And he can sing stuff like part of your world to get your Lilo back or to get your Simba back, then play your Simba back out. Put him in bodyguard mode. I really, really like this prince, so much to the point that I'm thinking of actually putting him up here. I think this prince is actually incredibly strong. Tiana is very cool. I don't know if Tiana is very good, but she's very cool. She hard counters the discard deck. Now, it doesn't hard counter like the big questers out of green, but if you have no cards in hand, they can't play just in time to slam out a bell. They have to just hard play a bell, and that deck has a lot of uninkables. So it's sometimes hard to do that. If you are just in steel and you just like run out your hand because you have a bunch of cheap stuff, your opponents can't play Dragon's Fire, and then they can't kill Cinderella. The only way to kill Cinderella is with actions that just say, kill that girl. This thing says you can't do that. You have to fight her. You cannot fight her. She is unfightable. She will kill you and your mother and laugh at you with her little song sword, looking cute the whole time. This Tiana is not very strong. It's a 1 ink 1/3. It does our Olaf impression, our Flynn Rider impression. It's not the end of the world. Char, the resist does not last until your next turn. I think this card is bad. Let's Storm Rage on is 3 ink uninkable fire the cannons, but it's a song. And it also says draw a card. So I think it's actually decent in archetype. We've got Pick a Fight, which is very similar to Freeze from the first set. So if you're in Steel Red, I like Pick a Fight. If you're in Steel Purple, Pick a Fight is really bad. And it's because you have Elsa and you have Freeze and they're the same card. And so because of that, I'm gonna throw it here in casual. If you're not in purple, I like Pick a Fight. If you're in purple, this card's bad. Next up, we've got Strength of a Raging Fire. This card is really good. The Cinderella sings it. You go Cinderella on turn 1, like Lilo on turn 2, kill anything you just played for literally anything you just played on turn 1. By singing this, dealing 3 damage to everything. That, you can't play around. That, 3 damage kills every 1-drop. Last Cannon, not very good. Steel has some good challengers, and if you don't have good challengers to Steel, you can go to another color for good challengers. You do not need this effect. Mouse Armor, interesting in the bodyguard deck. Obviously, it's meant to go on making Mouse bodyguard. Give them resist. Give the bodyguards from the first set resist 1. Gives anything resist 1 for free. Only 2 ink to play it. Uninkable, which is not great. So you really don't want to see this in multiples. But you know what? I think it's actually pretty good. And finally, we've got Weight Set. Because it's inkable, I think it actually moves up in a big way. I don't think this is going to be all over the place because you do have to like play a turn behind and you're playing characters. One of the reasons why the songs one is so good is because you can play them for free, and why this items one is so good is because you can play a bunch of really cheap items. A lot of characters that have 4 cost or more are not going to be cheap, so paying that extra 1 on top is going to be pretty difficult. Now, if you're already in yellow where you're playing Lantern, but yellow doesn't have a lot of guys that play 4 or more, but it's inkable, so in the worst case scenarios, we don't have a lot of those cards, or you have it in the early game, you can ink it. This card is interesting. If you guys have a deck idea built around this thing, let me know. Drop it in the comments below. I'm interested to see what you guys can do with this card. But that is the end of our Lorcana Rise of the Floodborn tier list. This is what I am looking at in this new set. Keep in mind, this guy is broken in the future. But as we can see, I think yellow and steel and green are really big this set. There's a lot of purple stuff and a lot of red stuff to keep an eye on. There's actually not that many red stuff to keep an eye on. There's a lot of purple stuff to keep an eye on. But I think that yellow, green, and steel are showing up in a big way this set, which is a little scary because steel was kind of already one of the stronger colors in the first set. And now it's just getting even more support, and resist in a mirror match is brutal for a steel deck. So we'll have to see how that shakes out, how steel decks adapt to other steel decks being in the meta, and how you can play around resist as best as possible. I am very excited for this set. I'm very excited for a lot of these new cards. I've got plenty of new decks that we've been brewing up and testing over here at the shop, and we plan on showing off very, very soon. So keep an eye on the channel to see all of our brand new Lorcana content, throwing some of our new decks against some of our old decks, updating our old decks, making brand new decks all together. This set is very exciting, and we are all on board for Disney's Lorcana. Let's just hope prices drop down. And with that, we will see you guys in the next video. See you around.